We need to look again at residential and institutional care to find out exactly why they don't work. On the surface, they should work well. They can protect children in the sense that they can lock the door and keep them in. They can certainly provide very advanced diagnostics in the form of psychiatrists and psychologists and social workers being ready to access and also being able to interact with the child. And also having a team of child care workers who are able to work directly with the child 24/7. Why doesn't it work? Well, the short of it is that if you bring behaviorally disordered youths together in one place, what happens is that they influence each other more than they're influenced by those around them. And therefore, the effectiveness of the child care workers, the psychologists, the psychiatrists, the social workers is dramatically diminished. The importance of the contagion effect can't be underestimated, and there are some fairly good studies that shows the importance of this. By contagion, I mean the interaction between the children is far more important an influence than the influence of the child care workers and the caretakers. The institutional care is also weakened by the fact that these people come and go. So they're there for a few hours and then they leave, and somebody else is there for a few hours and they leave. And therefore, any chance that the child or the adolescent, the youth would have to connect with someone in order to work through a specific problem is dramatically weakened. And you can see how that power of that power of presence would be far less than, let's say, the power of presence that a foster parent would have. One who's there every day, it doesn't change, the buck stops here, and yes, I can stop and listen. And finally, there is the less recognized but very important effect of post-traumatic stress on the workers themselves. The workers themselves deal every day with children who are themselves traumatized. And we know that when you're traumatized, you have less and less access to the kinds of emotional communications and emotional experiences that really make for connection and attachment. When you're traumatized, you tend to work far more from the perspective of fight, flight, or authority, or withdraw. And in group homes, when you actually work there, and I've worked with group homes for 30 years, and I was working in group homes as a staff member for 30 years, certainly felt this firsthand. What happens is that as the staff become more and more traumatized by the difficult behaviors of their charges, they enter into a fight-flight mode, which makes them either become overly controlling, overly punitive, and overly reactive, and not nurturing enough. And regardless of how good the staff member is, regardless of how well trained they are, trauma is trauma. And we know enough about trauma to know that if it's allowed to become a dynamic part of your experience, it grows. So what we find in residential treatment facilities is that there's an increasing emphasis on security and control, a diminishing emphasis on attachment and nurturing, and eventually it's almost inevitable that there will be instances of abuse that will emerge that cause these institutions to now and then come up into the press and be seen as places that are dangerous for children. There is also the fact that from the institution's perspective, having control of the kids, preventing them from harming the community, is a #1 priority for them. It establishes their credibility, it establishes their reputation. Quite different from a foster family or a family empowered by an extended family system. In that case, the community and an extended family is very ready to understand when the child is acting out, because they know this child is prone to that, and they will forgive and support and help redress. Institutions, however, have this idea that they need to be the self-sufficient controller of children in the community, and that, of course, is a recipe for disaster. So there's a number of things that make these institutions not work. A, they're big and they have too many behaviorally disordered kids in them, and the kids influence themselves. B, there's no constancy of care to allow them to function. D, they have traumatized staff, and regardless of how many times the institution will tell you that's not so, it is so. They have traumatized staff, traumatized by the children, who eventually enter a dynamic of control and withdraw, and they have traumatized children who add to that dynamic. And finally, the last point is that they have institutions and Groupon have this priority, this mandate, this self-given mandate that they control kids so that they don't harm the community. And this establishes the priority of control over nurture. Our next segment will look at the issue of how the systems, the large systems in our community, continue to use these facilities despite the very strong research showing that it doesn't work. And despite our understanding of why it doesn't work, we need to know why social workers, psychiatrists, and various members of the care team continue to endorse and refer children to these places.